everybody. This is Ahmed Ofi speaking from IT Events. And here we go for a very exciting webinar about how can IoT support sustainability in the MENA region with Dr. Mohammed Al-Surf, Regional Manager, Saudi Arabia, US Green Building. The webinar will take us in a 1 hour. Last 10 minutes will be for Q&A, so please write your questions in the chat section. Dr. Mohammed, please go on.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And good afternoon to you all. I hope my voice and sound is clear. So, just as an introduction to who I am, so I'm Dr. Mohammed Al-Sarf. I'm the Regional Manager for USGBC and Green Building Council in Saudi Arabia. I have a PhD in Sustainable Green Buildings and a Master's degree in Project Management with a Bachelor's in Architecture. I manage all of the activities and projects for USGBC in Saudi Arabia. I've also authored a book called Sustainable Housing in Saudi Arabia, Challenges and Opportunities. In addition to being a chairman of Green Building Chapter in Saudi Umran Society, I'm also a member of several local and international societies such as the Saudi Council of Engineers, International Real Estate Society, Pacific Rim Real Estate Society, Asian Real Estate Society, and the Project Management Institute. Also, I was honored to be the first Saudi to have the USGBC faculty designation, a true advisor, and the International Sustainability Society professionals as a sustainability associate. So, we're going to talk about today the relationship between sustainability and the Internet of Things and how can IoT improve sustainability in MENA region. So in the beginning, let's talk about what is IoT and how can we integrate the definition of IoT and integrate it with sustainable buildings and sustainable urban development. So technology has a role to play and has grown at a phenomenal rate over recent decades, continuously innovating and finding ways to improve on processing power, data management, and utilization, also connecting people and improving lives. Significant advances have been made across all sectors as a result of these needs. So we're going to see the relationship between the Sustainable Development Goals issued by United Nations and Internet of Things and how this revolution has been connected with different Sustainable Development Goals. So we're going to talk in detail about certain Sustainable Development Goals and then link them to Sustainable Urban Development and Green Buildings. So SDGs and IoT is basically the connection is very clear, especially in several Sustainable Development Goals, which we're going to see. The World Economic Forum highlighted how much current IoT projects can contribute to achieving the SDGs. So they point to research conducted by IoT Analytics of over 640 IoT projects, where 75% of the projects in the study contribute to Sustainable Development Goals that relate to commercial and industrial applications. So if sustainability is included in the design, the number of SDGs addressed by the project can potentially increase. And we're going to see how can IoT improve citizens' lives by adopting the Sustainable Development Goals using IoT. So the IoT technology is contributing to the improvement of citizens' quality of life and companies' competitiveness. So among the reasons why these companies and why people and why these organizations compete and use IoT technology, basically the research has found that manufacturing costs are reduced and better use of natural resources and preservation. So IoT can actually give us an indication of how much natural resources we need to use and how to preserve them. Additionally, product quality improvement is keen and very evident in certain industries such as manufacturing, such as transportation and so on. So the quality will be improved if we adopt IoT in the Sustainable Development Goals by improving citizens' lives as well. And finally, regulatory compliance. So IoT, when we measure the performance and when we measure our impact on the environment, we also adapt and apply regulatory compliance. One of the key issues we saw with the relationship between IoT and the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're going to go through this in detail later on, is goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities. And smart city basically is something that's going to be coming in the near future and is going to be the trend as soon as 2025. So, what is the definition of a smart city? A smart, sustainable city is an innovative city that uses information and communication technology, so ICTs, and other means to improve quality of life, efficiency of urban operation and services, and competitiveness, while ensuring that it meets the needs of the present and future generations with respect to economic, social, environmental, as well as cultural aspects. So this definition is very it's complicated, and at the same time it's specific to how the relationship between adapting ICTs or IoT and developing a sustainable smart city. So let's go into detail into the different aspects and sustainable development goals that go alongside with IoT and how can these be applied. So the first thing with IoT technology for SDGs is goal number 6, which is clean water and sanitation. So how the IoT contribute to achieving this goal? Basically through three items: quality, prevention, and saving. So through quality, basically we can control water quality both for human and animal consumption and for irrigation use. Prevention, we can prevent floods in rural and urban areas due to river overflows, so we can have sensors that can tell us if we have a flood coming in or not. Also, in terms of saving and preservation, we can reduce water wastage with intelligent management of supply networks. The other goal is goal number 9, which is the industry innovation and infrastructure. So, for the lower income countries, the existence constraints regarding infrastructure affect firm productivity by around 40%. So, it's very crucial that when we target goal number 9, especially in low income countries, is that the infrastructure has to be adapted very well. And we can use IoT basically to help us contribute in achieving the goal. And we can achieve them basically through these 7 targets. First is prevention, detection, storage, security, transport, parking, and traffic people. So through prevention, we monitor production process to optimize and prevent failures. Through detection, we detect the structural health of the facilities. Storage, we basically control storage spaces. Security, we improve security and surveillance systems for communities. And transportation, we basically trace goods and control their condition for animal transport, feeding, frozen, and so on. Basically, for parking, we control traffic and parking infrastructures. And traffic people, we manage the flow of people in places of great influence, such as airports, stations, shopping centers, and so on. Even now, we can also control traffic of people in the 2 holy mosques, especially during Umrah or Hajj period. Okay, we touched upon this in the previous slide, which is goal number 11, the sustainable cities. So let's look at the targets. But it's very important to keep in mind how much this is very important, because in the near future, by 2030, we're going to reach over 60% of the population that will live in cities. So half of humanity, 3.5 billion people, live in cities today, and 5 billion people are projected to live in cities by 2030. So the world's cities occupy just 3% of Earth's land, but account for 60 to 80% of energy consumption and 75% of carbon emission. So even though the land mass is very minimal, but our effect on it is very huge. So the contribution of this goal to IoT basically is through these 5 objectives or targets. First is pollution, water, energy, waste, and mobility. So through pollution, we want to control the environmental pollution and mitigate it. Water, basically, as we said in goal number 6, we want to monitor water sanitation system. In energy, basically, we want to optimize energy consumption and give us solutions how also to improve energy performance and use renewable energy. In the waste target, basically, we want to improve waste management. in mobility, facilitating intelligent mobility. And this is something that is being done in the recent years. Additionally to the 5 previous, we have 5 other targets that can be adapted at a larger scale. So green spaces, city halls, resources, tourism, and data. So through green spaces, favoring the creation of spaces that are more livable, greener, less polluting, and more welcoming to its citizens. In city halls, we want to help managers of administrations to make better decisions based on the data obtained. So if the city mayors, for example, or the governors of cities can have real-time data, they can make better decisions on how to improve the lives of their citizens. Okay, for resources, we want to improve the management of natural resources and public spaces. Tourism, we need to boost the tourist attraction of visitors to sustainable destinations. And that implies that the destinations that people will go to need to also be managed in a sustainable way, and people need to be educated on how to use those facilities or do those vacations in a sustainable way. Finally, the data, we want to generate new business models for big data exploitation of smart cities projects. One of the important goals that also we can mitigate and use IoT in is number 13, climate action. So, given current concentrations and ongoing emissions of greenhouse gases, it's likely that by the end of this century, the increase in global temperature will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. Global emissions of carbon dioxide have increased by almost 50% since 1990. So we are going to exceed the agreed upon degree that was agreed upon in the 2015 summit by the United Nations Development if we proceed to the same as business as usual. So IoT can contribute in these objectives in resources and in the environment. So for resources, we want to manage natural resources to get the most out of the least environmental impact. And for the environment, we need to increase plant production for consumption and environmental care. With those definitions and the link between IoT and sustainable development goals, this brings us to the application of it through green buildings. So now I'm going to talk about green buildings and IoT. The definition of IoT of green buildings has been defined in several ways and several definitions, but I'm mentioning here the definition according to the Environmental Protection Agency. So it tells us that green building is the practice of creating structures and using processes that are environmentally responsible and resource efficient throughout the building's life cycle, from setting the design, construction, operation, maintenance, renovation, and deconstruction. So we're thinking of the whole life cycle of the building. So with that, the link between IoT and green buildings, IoT is poised to transform the way we do business with vast amounts of new data sets being generated constantly, and IoT will create tremendous new opportunities, especially in the construction industry. In addition to that, the potential financial impact of IoT in the region is significant. So according to the IDC data, IoT spending in the Middle East and Northern Africa is predicted to be as high as 12.6 billion by 2021. Now with IoT, we generate big data. So the use of IoT is already moving to its next phase, where it's no longer being used to track and actuate, but to generate data that serves as a revenue stream to do business. Data being generated through IoT assets is being sold as insights or being used to spin off entirely new business. And we're going to talk about the technology distribution and disruption through IoT. So with big data streaming analytics and Internet of Things, we basically can have better value creation for our assets and for our different industries that we're going to use IoT in. In Saudi Arabia, there's some figures that I wanted to share with you. So the Internet of Things basically reshaped the future of Saudi Arabia, and the growth estimate of 16.01 billion by 2019, which was basically in 2014 4.8. So we're seeing an increase 4 times that in 2014. The kingdom has taken the lead regionally to increase the infrastructure capacity for the internet in line with Vision 2030 and the potential economic impact of 3.9 trillion to 11.1 trillion a year by 2025. So, tremendous increase in investment by the Saudi government, and also similar to what's happening in the region in MENA. For example, in the UAE, both Dubai and Abu Dhabi have launched several IoT initiatives. The United Arab Emirates stood at 500 million on IoT spend in 2017 and is expected to reach 900 million by 2021. Abu Dhabi International Airport, for example, uses IoT for its passengers flow management system, while Dubai's RTA is investing in a smart traffic project to ease congestion and enhance efficiency. So we see these examples all over the region, and we're going to see more investments coming in the near future, as soon as next year, 2021. So going back to the definition of green building and relating it to IoT, green building design and system rarely address building operations. Buildings usually are considered to be objects. They're not considered to be responding back to the occupants. But with IoT, we can have buildings basically speak to us and tell us how the building is doing. So today, green buildings need to provide a dynamic response to such things as occupant needs, operating policies, and space management changes. Most buildings, include green ones, have not yet integrated intelligent building equipment and systems. So we're going to see a shift, even in traditional green buildings, to be from a stagnant and an object that does not talk to us, that does not give us any feedback, to an intelligent building, to a smart building. That brings us to the definition of a connected building. So what is a connected building? Basically, it generates huge data from multiple systems such as energy, IT, access, security, operations, and so on. And due to the variety and velocity and volume of the data, conventional methods of manual analysis does not produce desired results. Therefore, industry category has big data problem. So with the huge amounts of data coming in, flowing in from the building systems, we need support from different platforms to help us collect the data and analyze it to make better decisions on how to operate the buildings. So big data is all about seeing and understanding the relationships, patterns within and among pieces of data generated from multiple sources for operational efficiencies, reducing energy consumption, improving occupant experiences, and optimizing financial performances. So we're going to collect all of these segments from big data, do the analytics through different softwares and platforms to help us make the decisions basically for the reasons we talked about in terms of operation efficiencies, reducing our energy consumption, and improving occupant experience, and supporting the needs of the people using the buildings. So we're no longer talking about buildings as assets or as objects. We're talking about buildings as an interactive set of spaces that can talk to people and rely on the objectives that people need to comply in order to be comfortable and productive. So these are a few of the items that we can support in terms of IoT in green buildings. So operating a building for long-term optimum energy or comfort, identifying signs of failure or degradation of equipment, correlating unexpected outcomes to changes in facility operation or use, implementing effective measurements and verification processes, and tools for energy use, operation, and efficiencies. And then we also can drive continuous improvement measurements. So when we have feedback from the building, it can tell us where the building is not doing as efficiently as we need. And when we monitor the change in operation and the conditions, basically it's much more preferable to have these conditions and the monitoring aspects on a real-time basis, so we can make decisions on a daily basis. And finally, anticipating energy budgetary needs based on concrete data. So previously, investors and building owners used to make decisions based on best guess scenarios. Now we can make decisions in a financial aspect on real data in real time. So I wanted to show you this graph that basically gives you the definition of different segments of buildings and how they can be more sustainable and adapting different technology patterns. So the first one basically we can see is the conventional building. This is very general. These are the buildings that we live on a daily basis. Now, green buildings, the definition is basically going towards high sustainability initiatives. So, building design, least environmental impact and resource efficient, concern for human comfort and environment, operational savings. So, this is all about sustainable architecture and building automation system, or using BIM software for designing green buildings. Now, if we have minor or low sustainability initiatives but high technology aspects, this brings us to connected buildings. So, building design for the grandness with ornament and reference, and sorry, intelligent communicating equipment, high use of IT or for communication. But the best case scenario is basically achieving smart buildings. This is where we achieve the highest sustainability initiatives with the highest technology aspects that we can use. So smart buildings basically is sustainable architecture plus IT technology and smart edge sensors, social and cloud. And the building can be adaptable, responsive, and it's a learning space for people, for users and visitors. We can have a reduced life cycle cost for operation, effective use of data and resources because we have it on a daily and real-time basis, and it's self-sustaining entity. So this is kind of the graph that we want to reach as a minimum, either for green buildings or connected buildings, and the best case scenario is going towards the final objective for smart buildings. So how can we implement IoT and big data and green buildings to achieve smart buildings? So basically, big data can help people drive operational efficiencies, reduce energy consumption, improve occupant experiences, and increase financial performance. So big data and IoT applications, for example, are shown over here. For example, forecasting capabilities, open system with flexible to expand, converted system, edge intelligence, and green buildings basically when we have sustainable architecture initiatives, energy and water efficiencies and metering system, using materials and resources that are environmentally friendly, improving indoor environment quality and waste reduction. This basically combining the IoT and big data with green building will hopefully achieve and reach to the final objective of a smart building where it's adaptive, it's optimized, it's self-healing, it's predictive, and it's compliant to regulations and codes that we want to apply, especially in achieving the sustainable development goals that we discussed in the earlier slides. So we talked about smart buildings. There's another definition that I wanted to share with you, which is called the living buildings. So we know what's green buildings and we know what's IoT and big data that we can use, both of them, and we can achieve another type of building which is called living buildings. And this is part of how can IoT support sustainability in the region. And it's basically a context-based learning and response, adaptive, optimized, and self-healed, predictive and compliant economic value frameworks to support life cycle optimization, and becomes part of smart community systems. So with all of those objectives and targets and KPIs that we talked about, it's very important to start applying them at a city scale. So the things we talked about is basically can be applied on a building level scale, but we need to apply them to a city scale, basically to reduce our global warming potential and climate change effects. And nowadays with the COVID-19 effect, we saw really the effect of how we can mitigate climate change basically by stopping production of manufacturing, for example, reducing transportation. So smart technology and IoT can help decision makers in cities to basically mitigate those effects and not necessarily going to the full extent of a lockdown due to pandemics. I'm going to give you some indications of what's happening in the Middle East in 2020 and some forecasts for the coming near future. So IoT in the Middle East focuses driving innovation and improving sustainability. And its adoption is expected to grow by two-digit numbers and reach 18 billion in the Middle East related IoT investment by 2023, as both governmental and private sector companies ramp up their digital transformation capabilities. And we're seeing that through different segments and sectors of the industry and to different countries as well. So I'm going to discuss with you top 5 IoT predictions for 2020 and 2021. These 5 include IoT security, which is going to be a priority, and this is very crucial, especially when we talk about cybersecurity. And it's going to be the year of voice AI. Improvements in healthcare are visible, and I'm going to show you some examples. The IoT in the workplace, especially nowadays with the COVID-19, and how can people return to their workspaces in a safe condition and in a friendly environment. And it's also the year for the smart city. So let's take them one by one. So with security, it's very basic and it's very crucial, it's very important. So as IoT becomes a bigger part of our daily lives, hackers will also be probing IoT products in the home for vulnerabilities, blocking connections, and denying access until money is paid, either by the user or the original equipment manufacturer. And this sadly has been increasing in the recent years. And with the recent lockdown and people working from their homes, we're seeing an increase in using internet to do work, to complete your tasks. And this is very crucial to basically, with IoT, something that's going to increase in the region in this year and next year is security, in the security proportion itself. Artificial intelligence has been viewed and used in the recent years. So it's predicted that the number of AI-powered speakers that help us complete tasks, such as playing music, turning lights on and off, will reach 500 million by 2023. In 2020, smart speakers use interfaces will evolve with the adoption of smart tablet-sized displays. And you can see it on a daily basis with your phones, even with some smart cars, smart technology in your house, in houses or offices. This is something that will increase, basically to increase productivity and efficiency. Healthcare, the reason I chose this topic and the top 5 triggers for applying IoT in the MENA region is basically because nowadays with the pandemic happening and prevention of future pandemics, we need to actually have a more efficient healthcare system and a more efficient and replying and responsive system that we can actually measure and perform better. So in Boston, for example, Medical Center in the USA, wireless sensors in fridges ensure patients' blood samples and medication are kept at the correct temperature. That's a very basic kind of example. And with 60% of healthcare providers already adopting IoT solutions, in 2020, we are likely to see even more smart hospitals and surgeries use AI-powered tools and interaction between patients and care providers. And I'm sure most of you have seen a few videos and a few demonstrations in exhibitions about how can IoT and AI support operations and surgeries and healthcare facilities. Now for the workplace, IoT can support through smart devices in the homes, basically bringing greater efficiency through the use of smart lighting, smart doorbells and cameras, and smart thermostats. Basically, nowadays you can actually control your home from your office, or vice versa. You can control your office from your home. In the next 12 months, we can expect to see the introduction of virtual assistants in the workplace, the creation of digital workplace that deliver the information we need anywhere and at any time, and even the use of augmented reality to change and improve the way we interact with colleagues. And this will be significant, especially with the shift and change of workforce and workspace conditions due to the pandemic and due to the shift of the organization structures of workspaces. And it's going to be the year of smart cities, and it's going to be extended to next year as well. So in 2019, we looked at some of the world's smartest cities, including New York and Antwerp, and in 2020, it's expected that cities will get even smarter. Now I'm going to talk about later about some case study that we can use actually to provide a platform to achieve smart city and a sustainable smart city as well. AI is expected to be the main driver for this, with investment into an AI training and the subsequent creation of 2.3 million jobs. So you can imagine how much investment can go into applying smart technologies and IoT into cities to make them smarter, but also to make them sustainable and apply the Sustainable Development Goals, which will also achieve some of the goals in achieving a better economy and better jobs for people, which can also introduce several other benefits and objectives. It's also evident with 5G that greater connectivity could propel smart cities forward, and 2020 may well be the year where connected environments become capable of running themselves autonomously, improving efficiency and productivity. Now, in some extreme cases, we can see this happening in 2020, but basically, we can see this happening prior to 2025, maybe as soon as 2023. So technology nowadays we can call them it's a disruptive phenomenon. So disruptive technologies advances that will transform life, business, and the global economy. And we can see this also in some forms of achieving sustainability through renewable energy. It's basically reported that consensus among world governments to limit CO2 emissions to a specific level in order to meet global climate change targets. That's the target basically that was targeted by the UN Development by 2025 when we had the Sustainable Development Goals launched to reach a 2 degrees Celsius reduction. But it had been updated in 2017 to be a 1.5 degrees Celsius reduction in global warming. Solar and wind power could present 15 to 16% of global electricity generation in 2025, which is up from only 2% today. So globally today we have only a generation from renewable energy sources by 2%. So we can have that much extension of renewable sources by 15 to 16% by 2025. And that's all by the support of IoT and getting the analysis we need to make the decisions on how to expand with renewable energy sources. In 2025, in terms of an economical perspective, the economic impact has the potential to reach 11.1 trillion. Organizations may already have solutions or solutions that incorporate a technological advancement that could propel progress towards achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And we see this on, as I said, on an annual basis or a year-to-year basis, even on a quarter-to-quarter basis. So that an increase in investments, an increase in efficiencies, savings, and so on happening, and we can see this much investment happening by 2025. So with all of that, I want to show you a case study for how we can apply IoT in achieving sustainability by adopting the Sustainable Development Goals in a real-time application that can actually measure the performance and help us make decisions. A saying here basically which the US Green Building Council has initiated, it states that you can't manage what you don't measure. So how can you measure the performance of a building and try to manage it without really having the IoT platforms to help you measure the data? So we talked about the deficiency of applying measurements through manual processes. So what we need to do is to actually implement IoT to help us manage the buildings better by the measurement performances that can be adapted into the buildings. So what the USGBC has launched, the US Green Building Council, is a platform that's an integrated platform using IoT, measuring different performance measurements in buildings, and this platform is basically called ARC. The data needed to implement in ARC are 5 parameters. We read the energy performance, water performance, we do a waste audit, a transportation survey per year, and the human experience. So basically with the water and energy, we also adapt the Sustainable Development Goals number 6 and 7 to achieve conservation and preservation of resources. So what we need to do is to collect 12 consecutive months of whole building consumption data. Now this can be done autonomously through building management systems that can be plugged into the ARC platform, or it can be manually. So some buildings come to us and say, we don't have that technology yet, but we have the data manually. We tell them, yes, you can still use the IoT platform, and you can still break up the data and make decisions based on analytics from the big data collected from the ARC platform. Now, in terms for the waste, what we need to do on the platform is to have a minimum of one data entry for whole building waste. So it's a one audit for the whole building that can be entered into the system. For the transportation element, we need to conduct one survey per year. This survey basically can generate how much carbon emissions are produced due to transportation to and from the building. Finally, for the human experience, what we need to do is to collect a minimum of one occupant satisfaction survey administration per year. Basically, the percentage here is we need to get at least 25% of occupants survey in the building. Additionally, we need to collect one sample for air quality for CO2 and total volatile organic compound concentrations, or TVOC. This is the platform online. This is from the actual website. So we need to use this IoT platform basically to measure your green building performance. Now, some of you know the LEED rating system, Leadership in Energy Environmental Design. ARC is basically a platform that can grant you later on LEED, but it's not necessarily applicable to buildings to pursue LEED or not. So basically, this can help you just make decisions on how to measure your performance and make it better. But it's not necessarily, you complete your steps to go for LEED, because some people still think that it's not necessarily to go for LEED, but we still urge them to use the ARC platform to help them measure the performance of their buildings and to help contribute to mitigating the climate change global warming effects. Now, as I told you, the 5 categories basically gives you a score from 100 points, and these points are categories based on the following performance scores. So energy is out of 33, water is out of 15, waste is out of 8, transportation is out of 14, and the human experience is out of 10. And basically for the energy consumption, we want to track the energy consumption for the past year, the 12 months data that we talked about. Water consumption is the same thing, so we can use the IoT platform to help us mitigate the consumption and tell us if we have any leakage or any problems in the building. Waste is also very important because nowadays we can use IoT in waste bins, and the waste bins can be a smart waste bin that can tell us if it's full or not, the recycling content, and so on. So in addition to using the smart technologies in waste points that we need to collect is basically the waste audit for ongoing waste tracking. Transportation is basically a result of a transportation survey for the occupants on what type of mode of transportation they use and how much distance they travel. The human experience is a combination of air quality testing and survey results. So basically we have a survey that's embedded in the online platform that can be sent to users, and it has an algorithm that can tell us how much the performance of the building is doing to reach comfortable conditions for the users, either through the air testing conducted or through the survey. So some details for the different parameters. As I said, the energy, basically it collects 12 months of data for the whole building use. You visualize immediately the score, and it compares against historical scores, local and global averages. So this is very important when people want to benchmark against either local buildings similar to their building or to global buildings. And it can help make decisions and improve your KPIs through this IoT to basically achieve your goals for sustainability through the year. So some companies nowadays will be having it to be mandatory to achieve or to supply its investors with a sustainability corporate report. This can help you make that report and can help you make that data input into that report. Uh, Using this also lowers the energy related carbon emissions in a higher score. You review your score analytics and you can break it down. When we talked about the big data, this is where this comes into play. So you really can break down the data into different segments and different sectors, and you can aggregate utility bills for GBCI review. The score is based on an emission per capita and unit area. For the water section, it's almost similar to the energy section, where you can provide 12 months of whole building water use. You immediately have the visualization of the score, and the same thing, you can compare and benchmark against local or global averages, and you can actually help the organization or the building to reach a sustainable standard and to reach better performance in terms of energy or water consumption. The same steps follow through lowering your water use is a result of a higher score, review score analytics, and aggregate utility bills for GBCI's review. And the score is basically based on consumption per capita and per unit area. Now for the waste, the input through the IoT platform is to provide at least one waste analysis that includes weight of waste generated and the weight of waste diverted from landfill. So two parameters come into play here. And then you actually visualize your score and then compare it to global and local benchmarks. Lowering waste generation and higher waste diversion rate will result in a higher score. The scores are reviewed and analytics can be generated. And the score is based on weight generated and diverted per capita. The transportation parameter, it basically administers a survey and receive a minimum response rate based off the building's occupancy. And the survey link is provided in the platform, so you don't need to actually do anything and submit a document for the survey. It's already embedded in the system. The survey link is provided in the platform, which can be emailed to occupants or make available in a common area or on an internet-enabled device. So let's say, for example, you're an office building where you have employees and visitors. So the employees can receive the email for the survey, while the visitors can have a display in the reception area where it's just a simple question asking them a transportation question. They can answer it in a couple of minutes. And that generates the score where you can visualize it and also compare it and benchmark it on a local or global average. And the distance travel is converted into carbon emission via mode of transportation. So the lower the emission, the better the score. This is why it's very important to measure this accurately, because this has a great impact on the overall score due to its carbon emission objective outcome, which will also help us achieve the different SDGs we talked about. Finally, the human experience parameter, it's a survey also which is embedded in the system, basically to receive a minimum response rate based off the building's occupancy. The survey link, as I said, is provided in the platform. The email is, of the survey to the occupants can be done, or you can also something like having a display iPad or a device on the reception area where people visiting the building can answer the simple survey. In addition to that, we need to conduct at least one air quality sampling for CO2 and TVOC, which is the total volatile organic compound concentration, at every 25,000 square foot. Once the data is collected, you can visualize the score and you can have benchmarking against, as we said, local or global averages. The higher occupant satisfaction and better indoor air quality results basically in higher scores. And once all of the data is collected, then we really come into the fun part of the software, is to break down the information and do the analytics and to help the decision makers make better decisions based on how the measurement of the building is really doing. And as I said, if you have an automation system for the building or building management system, and that reads the data on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, that makes the decision much, much better. But if it's not automated, if there's no building management system, you still can provide the data on a monthly basis, and you can still make the decisions to make the building performance better on a month-to-month basis or on a yearly basis. And in addition to that, the IoT platform also supports different portfolio projects. So say, for example, a company has different branches of the office or different segments of residential units and so on. You can still do an analytics of and comparing the conservation and preservation of energy, water, and so on through different 5 parameters we talked about, and you can benchmark against your own portfolio and compare it to local or global averages. So big data here plays a very big impact, and it's a very effective tool to basically help achieve the sustainable development goals either on a local or global scale. So this is kind of a summary of the 5 parameters where we have the input, compare the data, show the score, and then have the performance made better through better decisions. And this is a screenshot of a different portfolio of a project where they have different building types, and you can see the better performance through the different parameters. So you can compare really basically how the buildings are doing in terms of energy consumption, and you can make decisions for the lower performing buildings to make them better performing and to actually increase their performance to make it better. And in addition to the parameters, we can also benchmark our carbon emissions for the whole portfolio and also have the benchmarking on a local or global scale. Currently, the system is being used globally and also in the MENA region. It's being used in different countries in the region. And you can see case studies that are available on the website where you can also use the platform, and it's free for use for all building types, so there's no cost associated with this using the software. Waste score, basically this is kind of a snapshot of what the waste score comes into play, and you can actually use the platform itself, or you can use an Excel file which is embedded in the system where you can upload it later on. Transportation, basically when you have the different transportation modes. So this screen, for example, shows the popularity of transportation mode. So you have carpools, trams, motorcycles or scooters, cars, which uses alternative fuel, car, which is used as a solo, buses, heavy rail, and walking. So the people using the building basically input how they come to the building through the different modes, and this calculates the overall carbon emissions due to the transportation modes for the users. This is something also from the website where you can have the user input how much miles, kilometers, meters, and so on, based on the different modes they use. The satisfaction survey, this is a screenshot of the satisfaction survey. So it's a very simple survey of a happy face or a frown face. So you are either extremely unsatisfied or extremely satisfied, and you toggle all around with the bar. And you can also tell the survey what's wrong with the building. Is it dirty? Is it smelly? Is it stuffy? Is it dark? And so on. This is basically how the score will generate as an animation, and you can see this actually generated on laptops, on the internet, on iPhones, on your tablets, and you can send the link of how your building is performing basically to all users or investors or to the public through social media, for example. And it shows you the score on either a monthly basis or on an annual basis or even on a daily basis. And this can help, for example, when you come into the building and you have it on a screen shown on the building entrance, it can help tell people how your building is really performing and how sustainable it is. Now, as I said, this score does not mean that the building has obtained LEED certification, but the score can be later on adapted and can be submitted for LEED certification. This is basically for existing building operation maintenance. This is actually the ARC platform and the IoT software used in the USGBC headquarters in Washington, D.C. Now you can use the same device for the software, which is the circle one here, or you can use it on any LCD screen or any TV screen that you have on the platform itself.
So every story about a green building is a story about people, and most importantly, will inspire the rest of the people to build something that is very precious and of high quality while actually balancing the economic interests. We want to assure that every project we certify stands by itself as an icon for success and an inspiration for the rest of the world to follow. So every story about a green...
That was a note by our president of USGBC and GBCI. And basically what we hope to achieve is one building at a time, and we're changing the world, as we said, at one building at a time. And we're getting bigger, stronger, and bolder every year. Please visit the website if you have any information, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can either contact me or reach out to IT Events for their support. So thank you all, and I hope this was an informative session for you.
Dr. Muhammad, thank you so much. Thank you all for your time today. We expecting more webinars about US green building and more webinars with Dr. Muhammad during 2020 and 2021. So please keep following us for more details. And here are the upcoming webinars organized by IT Events. Next webinar will be at 12th of August. Thank you all again.